Whether your water bill went up after the ice storm or it stayed the same, a new Metro Council proposal could still affect you.
Let's go to WSMV's Lydia Fielder, who dug into who would actually benefit and what this proposal would mean for everybody's future water bills. Lydia?
Yeah, Jeremy, right now, Nashville leaders are considering a one-time credit of about $25 for all Metro Water Service customers, adding up to roughly $6 million in total relief here. The proposal comes after many homes and businesses did this, stripped faucets for days to prevent frozen pipes during the January storm. Metro Water data from a sample here shows about a quarter of customers used more water. Most increases were small at that, about $10 to $20 higher than a typical monthly bill. Just so you know, the data is adjusted to remove cases with leaks or burst pipes. So the ordinance would give every customer almost the same credit, regardless of how much their bill changed. Metro Water says the plan is fair and equitable, but Metro Council member Courtney Johnston there argues the majority of the credit goes to people who were never affected and warns the lost revenue could create pressure for future rate increases.
Most of the people that we're crediting were not impacted by this. That doesn't seem fiscally responsible to me.
State law requires all users to be treated the same. So we cannot give a credit to one customer and not offer a credit to another customer.
So we talked to Metro Water customer Joe Ha. He runs a retreat center in Jolton here. His bill, he says, went from its usual $130 to almost $800. He says the city should help affected customers, yes, but believes help should focus on those with the biggest increases.
$25, that's really not going to do much. And I would just assume the city keep that in their coffers. If there is compensation needed, there's probably a better way to do it.
So that ordinance is scheduled for final consideration tomorrow night. If approved, the credit would automatically appear on future water bills. Just this afternoon, Councilmember Johnston filed a substitute ordinance she's been working on. In it, she's proposing using unused federal relief money to help customers who experienced what she calls meaningful increases, not minor fluctuations or customers whose bills didn't change at all. You can see that full proposal right now in this story on our WSMV4 News app. We'll certainly watch that meeting and let you know what comes out of it, Jeremy.
Good information there, Lydia. Thank you.